Hamilton, co-founder of Monarchy, and it is my pleasure to welcome today our good friend Johnny Henderson, who is a partner of Airtree and the lead on their Web3 practice. Good morning, John. Welcome.
Morning, Andy. Thanks for having me.
I wore the special hat just for you.
The golfing hat. I like it.
The golfing hat. Well, the golfing hat because you've promised to take me for a game of golf for like 5 years, and I think it was me who promised.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like you're starting this on the wrong foot if I'm the one making that promise. I've definitely been guaranteed a game of golf in New Zealand at some point.
I'm actually coming to Sydney in January.
We could actually make this happen.
I think we're going to make it happen in January. So that's going to, as long as we're allowed to get out of the country. I was just off the air saying to John that we're 101 days into lockdown in New Zealand, and we used to look at our mates in Sydney and Melbourne and go, oh my God, imagine what that'd be like. And then we're in it.
It was brutal. And I think at 101 days, you're past anything we went through. So I'm feeling for you, man. I'm feeling for everyone because there's it's hard for everybody, but there's, I think, mental health impacts on literally every person in society. So look after yourselves.
Yeah, and it's an interesting question, right? Because obviously, we're mates, and I know you and your situation. You're a dual house workers with 2 young kids, and I was going to talk about this later. But so, how have you guys through lockdown? Because like my kids are 15 and 17, right? So they're adults and they just go and do their own thing, and they're incredible, right? Especially when one of them can hear me talking right now. And she's like, are you doing another live? But how have you coped?
It was hard. It wasn't perhaps as hard as what Aucklanders are going through, in the sense that daycare was open for much of our lockdown. So that was a lifesaver. I think there was a month and a half where we couldn't send them to daycare, and that was brutal because we were both trying to work full-time jobs and look after kids full-time, which meant sort of one of us up at 4 a.m. and one of us working after dinner, and definitely unsustainable. But daycare being open was a game changer, to be honest.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And you both got through it, but it's amazing how you can actually get through it, right? You just get in the grind and just go, we just got to keep going.
Yeah, and I think everybody has their own sort of challenges. Like, I think for us, having kids at home was hard, but I was at lunch yesterday with some of my team. We've got 2 interns on our team who are at university. And it sounds really easy if you're an 18-year-old, you've got no cares in the world. But I was talking to them, and can you imagine going through 1st and 2nd year university in lockdown? Like, it's just stuck at home, probably with your parents, not living your best life, and then entering what should have been a 3-year experience with 1 year to go and no friends. Like, I think there's people across the board who are sort of having different versions of pain, but it's tough.
Yeah, I think it's actually good to reflect and for those of us who are a little bit older, those opportunities, it's kind of okay, but for those missed opportunities in life,
you don't get 1st year of uni back.
No, it's so true. Or last year of school. Hey, so I've been doing a lot of these talks since I went down the rabbit hole of the meta world and the Web3 world, and just had some amazing people on. And I was super keen to get you to come and talk to us because of your perspective, both as someone super interested in the world as an individual, but separately because of your day job hat, which is backing, great founders and founding teams across New Zealand, Australia, and around the world. So why don't we start with kind of your day job and your role as a partner at Airtree, and maybe just sort of tell us a little bit about Airtree.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a partner at Airtree, have been since 2016. We are a venture firm, a bit over $500 million that we're investing in predominantly seed and Series A rounds in Aussie and Kiwi founders. Historically, that has largely been Web2 companies. So, folks like Joyous and Solve and Lawview in New Zealand, and Canva and A Cloud Guru and Pet Circle and others in Australia.
Canva was quite good for you. What's the sort of return on that?
Oh, a wonderful return. The the fund that, well, I mean, we have multiple funds that have Canva in it, but the first fund that invested in Canva has 3 separate companies, each of which have returned the fund by themselves. So, you know, it's been amazing. So yeah, we've got 80 portfolio companies. I think a bunch of the, you know, most interesting software and internet companies in this region. We've been going since 2014. And then I think part of the reason you wanted to talk to me was that on a PA and work basis, I invest in Web3. And so increasingly we found ourselves investing in Web3 companies at Airtree. And then obviously I've been doing that for 7 or 8 years. So that's...
PA means on your own personal account.
Sorry, yes, yeah, investing personally.
Interesting. How many boards? Oh, no, first question. So 80 portfolio companies at Airtree.
Yep.
What percentage of the ones that you see would you invest in typically?
About 1 in 75 to 100. So 1 to 2%.
Okay.
It's
1 to 2%.
Which is the story of venture the world over, to be honest. It's a business of exceptions, and we're trying to back a very specific type of company that has the potential to be very, very big. We try and only back companies that by themselves, if they work, can return the fund by themselves, which means that it's also incredibly high risk, and you have to assume that a whole bunch of the companies you invest in will fail. But those that don't, and those that kind of realize their dreams, will make up for all of those failures.
And I suppose that's the point. If you're 1 in 75 to 100, for every one you invest, you're trying to get, like 1 in 10 or 2 in 10 being really, really big, right?
Yeah. So of that cluster, 6 of them are unicorns now. So 6 of them are now valued in excess of $1 billion, and we invest in all of those at either seed or Series A.
Yeah.
So you have to hit a few of them for it to work across funds, but yeah, the idea is that all of them have the potential to go on and do that.
Now, we're going to talk about Web3 and your personal interest in that, but how many boards are you
on? 9.
So that's quite busy. Do you turn up to every board meeting?
Yes, Andy.
I'm just asking, 9 board meetings, that's a lot. And so here's an interesting question, because obviously I know, because I do my research on the companies that you're on the board of, and there's quite a big cross-section. Do you think VCs can be VCs and make investments in areas that they're not a domain expert in?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's one we grapple with at Airtree, to be honest. So I think we take a huge amount of risk in areas that we think we understand. We are less disposed to, I guess, completely new sectors that we have no experience or background in, which has seen us, not invest in various kind of hardware companies because we don't really feel like we have any hardware expertise. It's seen us not invest in pharma or synthetic bio because we don't feel like we have anything specific to add in those sectors. But obviously we've missed some great companies. We missed Rocket Labs, for example, because we didn't feel like we understood like how to get things up to space. And that has been a wonderful investment for everybody who took that risk initially. So
a lot of us missed that. I mean, I text Peter an offer of 10 million, not my money, someone else's.
Yeah.
At early days, and that didn't happen.
Yeah, and I mean, we never saw it, obviously, but I think we would have passed on Tesla, and we probably would have passed on SpaceX. So there are colossal companies that, by being sort of focused on our knitting, we've probably missed out on. And we're constantly debating, A, how far outside our expertise can we go? And B, if you go outside your expertise, why does a founder take your money? Is kind of the other question we ask ourselves. I think
it's a great question.
I think our view is that in 2021 in particular, capital is an absolute commodity. And so we always try and persuade ourselves that we have something of value to add, or something specific, or a reason that a founder would choose us over others. that's held us back from some sectors we don't know particularly a lot about, but it's a live debate. I'm not sure what the right answer there is.
Daily, weekly habits for you as a VC, right? What does your week look like? Because there's a lot of mystery around being a VC. I know the reality, but I'd be interested in what do you do other than go to board meetings? What do you do? What's your week look like?
Yeah, so it's hard to generalize for a week per se, because some weeks can be all portfolio related, some weeks can be all sort of new investment related. But I think were I to generalize, about half my time is spent working with those 9 companies I mentioned. So whether and the board meetings is really like the tip of the iceberg there. Like I'm in.
So you actually add value?
Well, I talk to them a lot. You have to ask them whether I add value, but I'm talking to them all the time. So Slack or WhatsApp or whatever about what's happening. 3 of my companies are raising money right now. I'd like to think I add value there because I'm kind of got some experience there. But 2 of them are hiring execs. I do kind of the sell interview at the end. So if you're hiring a VP Eng or a CRO, they'll often get a couple of candidates who they're excited about, and those candidates are umming and ahhing about whether to take the job, and then they bring me in to interview them, but really I'm telling them how wonderful the company is. So I do a lot of that kind of thing. I connect them up with other founders within our portfolio and people in our team that can help. So that's kind of 50% of my time.
Yeah.
I would say percentage that's too high is internal stuff. I mean, we're running a business of our own, so working on the Airtree business is probably 10 to 15% of my time, and then 35% would be some combination of meeting new founders or talking to people like you who are connected to founders. And then I'm at 100, but then there's another 10% that's probably absorbing information about the world somehow.
Now, funny thing is we move into this meta or Web3 world, right? Do you know my perception when I thought about you, I was like, oh, he's just, and take it the right way. Sometimes I talk a lot and, he's just got into this space, just, like yesterday. And then when I actually did my research, I was like, oh, actually your history into this kind of crypto Bitcoin goes like back maybe 8 years.
Yeah. High DGen score.
Say again?
High DGen score.
What does that mean?
That's sort of crypto for in deep in the weeds, playing around with projects and doing a lot of stuff.
From when?
Well, 2013 was when I got started. So I led the angel round into CoinDesk. Was kind of my first foray into this space. And CoinDesk, as you know, is a media property. Like, it's not even a crypto company. But that got me into the Bitcoin world. I led the angel round into CoinDesk because I was just crypto curious, and bought my first Bitcoin at the same time. And I was a VC, I should say, at a different fund in London and New York at that time. And the CoinDesk investment was kind of strategic, to be honest. We made a return on it because we sold it to Barry Silbert's group, Digital Currency Group, in a couple of years after that. But what was really cool about the CoinDesk investment was that there was only one crypto media property back in the old days, and every Bitcoin founder wanted to be covered by it. And so it was this extraordinary investment where I was an advisor to the CEO, but I could get to every major Bitcoiner in the world because they were all wanting to get covered by CoinDesk. And so through that, in the sort of 2013 through 15 years, I got quite involved in the Bitcoin community. And at my previous fund, I was scurrying around trying to figure how to make Bitcoin extensible, which people in your audience would laugh at because it's just exactly the same conversations that are happening around Taproot and Lightning and all the things that are happening in Bitcoin in 2021. Those same conversations were happening in 2013. And one of the theses back then was that, the main thesis back then was that Bitcoin would either be payments or smart contracts, that it wouldn't just end up being a store of wealth. And so we spent a bunch of time looking at like the extensibility of Bitcoin, things like colored coins, like how do you make Bitcoin sort of more programmable? And there were a bunch of protocols, and there still are a few in existence trying to do that. And we looked really closely at that. And through that, I met one of the early Bitcoiners whose name was Vitalik Buterin, and who was talking about this new protocol and this new smart contract platform called Ethereum. And I actually tried to convince my previous fund to invest in the Ethereum token sale. And my partners at the time basically said, "Hey," and I was a junior VC, and my partners at the time basically said, "Hey, cool idea, but like, no way. What the fuck is a token? You idiot. Go back and find us some SaaS companies." Which in 2014 was a totally reasonable thing to say. Nobody knew what a token was. I think Ethereum was the third ever. So calamitous miss by them, obviously. I invested in some PA because they said no to me and I was cranky about it. And then, to be honest, I kind of forgot about it. Like, Ethereum did nothing for a long time, until the ICO boom. So I sort of had these Ethereum tokens. I sort of loosely kept an eye on it, but wasn't focused at all. And it was flatlining and there wasn't much development. And then when things happened, it was the ICO craze.
Yeah.
And so Ethereum, 2017. 2016, 2017. Yeah. And so Ethereum, the great promise was, all of the things that it's doing now in terms of smart contracts. But the reality at that time was what appeared to be very, very scammy kind of funding mechanisms and a whole bunch of projects that were rugging and, just outright scams and people running off and buying Lambos and all of kind of the memes that have appeared now. And so I kind of pulled back from the sector personally. Like, I sort of did a few ICOs at the beginning because I thought it was interesting. And then I sort of saw what was happening and it all kind of grossed me out a little bit. And in the meantime, we had funded and looked at a whole bunch of Bitcoin companies doing things like versions of decentralized finance, doing things like provenance for property registries, doing things like cross-border payments, all kinds of registry type solutions. None of them had worked. So I was pretty kind of tired after 4 years in the sector, and then it felt like a scam. And so then I just kind of did nothing. I did nothing from 2017 to 2020.
Wow.
Which is basically when all of the other guests you've had on this platform had this realization that crypto was a real thing and spent all their time on it. So huge mistake from me. And sorry,
do you regret that or not?
Oh yeah, massively. Like, given what's happened, like, I wish I was deep in the sector. And frankly, there's almost no one still in the sector that was around in 2013, because at some point along the way, they either did really well and retired or got disenfranchised and skedaddled. And so I'm sort of unusual, I think, in the sense that I've come back. And it was the DeFi summer that got me back. One of my good friends was one of the founders of Open Bazaar, which was a decentralized eBay, if you like. Like, it was a peer-to-peer marketplace in a sort of much more legitimate way than Silk Road. And he was Twitter DMing me in Q1 of 2020 saying, "Hey, look at the TVL in DeFi." And we were just having this exchange where I just said, "Come on, Washington, like, this is ridiculous. We've talked about this. It's not going to happen. It's not working. Like, stop bugging me." And then every fortnight, every fortnight he'd be like, 800 million in TVL, 2 billion in TVL, 6 billion in TVL. And at that point I was like, oh crap, like, maybe this is real this time. And that brought me, I'm sort of going on a tangent here, Andy, apologies, but one of the things in venture we think about a lot with sort of new technologies is what we call S-curves of innovation. So you'll have this long flat period where the infrastructure gets built at the beginning. And that's the installation phase. And then you get this uptick where people actually start using the technology, and that's the deployment phase. And the magic in investment, and the magic therefore in venture, is to try and invest at the beginning of the deployment phase. So I sort of had this framework in my mind where I was like, blockchain will be a thing one day, but who the hell knows how long the installation phase is going to go. And when Washington started texting me about DeFi summer, I was like, this could be the deployment phase. Wow. So anyway, that's a very long ramble, but that's what got me back into crypto.
So interesting question off that is, I've got two questions. So the first thing is, how did the conversation go with your partners at Airtree when you went, hey, I think we're getting to this point now on that S curve where we really need to look at it? Was that an easy conversation?
Yeah. We culturally deliberately try and be very optimistic about technology shifts. Our success relies on us being kind of early and contrarian and right.
Before it happens, right? That's
exactly.
how you get value.
Exactly. And they knew that I'd been following this space for a long time, and we'd been talking about this on and off over the years. It wasn't like 2020 was the first discussion we had. It was just that 2020 was a slightly different tone to the discussion because there was actual usage rather than just infrastructure being built. The compliance department was a very different conversation, but the investment team was excited.
Yeah, the compliance is kind of super interesting. We're going to get into that. Personally, what excites you about this, the Web3 meta, world, separate to your VC investment? Because, you've got shed loads of NFTs, right?
Yep. Yeah. I've got so many. I think it's really hard to talk about Web3 as one thing. I think the two, and there's a gazillion things we could talk about. The two things that fundamentally excite me are what I think are complete disruptions to the way the financial system works. And I think we could talk all day about how many problems there are with cross-border payments and investment bankers and the discrimination associated with getting loans. And there's all kinds of issues that sort of centralized third parties just bring in, both in terms of economic inefficiencies, but also sort of societal problems that they cause. So I think there's a radical disruption that can happen to the way finance works. That's kind of one, and we can talk about that.
How do you differentiate having a day job that is about making returns for your investors from your position as John Henderson as a socially minded person? So this capitalist versus community benefit, how do you marry those together, or is it not such an issue for you?
I don't know if they're
do you care about social causes?
Oh yeah, 100%. My biggest Web3 investment is a thing called KlimaDAO, which is trying to bring carbon credits off chain to on chain to help with increasing the global carbon price. So yeah, I think the two are relevant to me, but I don't know if there's a natural conflict between capitalism and social causes necessarily.
Okay.
If you've got a specific example, that might be a better way to talk about it. In the abstract, I'm not sure I've got a.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's good.
Anyway, so can I continue my Web3 thing?
Of course.
So on the one hand, we can talk about disrupting finance, and then on the other hand, I think, and this is a bit more out there, but I think the consumer web implications of Web3 are, I think, colossal. So if people have talked about this a lot, and I'm sure people have talked about this in this forum, but if Web 1 was HTTP, SMTP, individuals on kind of a peer-to-peer basis talking and connecting and putting up websites and bulletin boards and all that kind of stuff, Web 2 was the rise of the internet giants who kind of extracted value to themselves. And the biggest culprits here, if you think about, I think about the creator economy a lot, partly because we've invested in Linktree, which is a set of tools for the creator economy, but also partly just because I think individuals finding their 1,000 true fans will be a sort of phenomenon going forward. But if you think about the biggest culprits here, if you're a YouTube influencer, so I don't know, Andy, you've got a golfing channel and you've got 10 million people watching you, and you've got a real relationship with that audience.
Yeah.
The way you monetize that, you get 50% of the ads that YouTube chooses to run. You're entirely at the behest of their algorithm, and you have no way of taking a relationship with those fans off platform. Instagram's even worse. You're a golf influencer and you've got 5 million golfers following you. You can't even monetize that at all. So that, to me, those platforms had a wonderful role in bringing, hundreds of millions and then billions of people online and sharing content. But I think we're kind of at the end of that road. Everybody's online now, and you have the content creation and the value of the platforms not in any way evenly shared between, the corporate that sits in the middle of it and the people that are doing the work. And so I think the promise of Web3 is disrupting that as well.
It's not really just a fairer and more distributed model for ownership, is it? It's a lot more than that. Do you know what I mean? Like Facebook gets 90% of the benefit, or Spotify gets 98%, and the artist gets 2%. It's more.
Yeah.
It's actually more than
Yep.
that.
Yeah, I mean, so there's any number of ways, any number of sort of paths we can go down here. I think a lot of it is a new version of marketing, if you like. So one of the problems with these platforms you're describing is if you're starting out, I don't know, Twitter today or Instagram today, and you're the first person posting photos, you get nothing out of it. Like there's the definition of these network effect businesses is that they're crap for the early users. With tokenized incentives, instead of a random bunch of sovereign wealth funds owning Twitter or VC funds owning Twitter, you can distribute tokens to those early users who are then economically incentivized to see the success of that platform, and they bring their friends in and they start using the platform. And so the money that Web2 companies spend on Google and Facebook ads, the Web3 companies are kind of not spending, but they're distributing tokens. And I just think it's a better mechanism. I think your early users are much more likely to be on your team.
Just a question on that, and I might be stupid, right? But if we take an example of a creator or a group of creators that come together around, say, Indigenous art or something like that, and they release a token, and or tokens, and people take them up. My question is, I can see if it's a limited number and limited supply, and if people want it and they build community, value goes up, right? And you pay more. But can you issue in the same community over time more tokens? Because you know what I'm asking? It's kind of like I see the FOMO happening on NFT projects. That's about constraining supply. But I also think about community causes, and I go, constraint of supply to increased value. Like it doesn't marry for me.
Well, so yes, in theory, these projects are almost all governed by DAOs. So I think
Just explain what a DAO is for people.
DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. So it's essentially a group of people who are united by their shared ownership of tokens, if you like. And typically you get 1-for-1 voting based on the tokens you own. So in your example, if you had a set of tokens and a set of token holders who wanted to increase the supply, that would usually go to a DAO vote. It's rarely. Or
do you just issue a little amount to start with, and then say we are going to release more over time?
Yeah, so that's what a lot of protocols do across the board. So and this is why when you're looking at projects, you see a difference between the circulating market cap and the fully diluted market cap. So most projects will issue a small amount of tokens, and then they'll hold back what they call a treasury of tokens, and then they'll release those to incentivize different behaviors or different users. And so in your case, I don't know, you have an Indigenous art social token. You might use the treasury to distribute tokens to up and coming emerging Indigenous artists to create art on your platform. And that's in the whole community's interest, because then there's more great art and more great artists as part of the platform. So yeah, what you're describing of releasing tokens over time is totally possible and is normal, but it's all generally prescribed up front, because I think the circumstance that you don't want happening is some random community member or the project owner changing the economics for everyone.
Are the odds the same, do you think, in this world around, you talked about 1 in 75 to 100, 3 in 10 of your investments going really well. Do you see that same success failure? And, we know that in small business, 70% of all small businesses that start are gone in 3 to 5 years. Like right now in this NFT world and the consumer apps, and like, can you see that same sort of success failure happening?
Yeah, I think so.
Like a lot of failures.
I think NFTs are, I think when you're talking about NFTs now, you're talking about for art specifically, right?
Yeah. Well, art and community initiatives.
Yeah.
Causes.
So, well, let's deal with them in turn. So I don't think NFT art projects are analogous to VC investments. I think, like, at least the way I look at NFT art is I tend to buy something either because I just really like it, or because I like the artist. And so that's different. That's not trying to necessarily create some gargantuan company that goes on for 10 years. It's just a community of people who get together and appreciate something. Part of that appreciation and part of, tokenization is that it's tradable. And I think, to be honest, I'm sort of a bit disappointed about how a lot of the NFT flipping has become the focus. So like, when we talk about, is it a 1 in 75 success rate? I don't think so. Like, I think if you have a successful drop and the artist is paid for the work that they've done, then it's already a success. And what happens after that is sort of incidental to me. I think the consumer web applications are very much venture-like in their failure rates and returns prospects. And then communities, again, I think is a bit different. The community I'm a part of that's in Web3 that's sort of the most active and engaged is a thing called Friends with Benefits. And they have a social token, the FWB token. You need to hold a certain number of those tokens to be a part of that community. And that in and of itself sort of incentivizes people to grow the community and to be active. But again, it's not like a venture investment. It's a group of people who their vision is to create a digital city. Like their whole thesis on the world is, it's sort of weird that your friends and your connections are all people who are within a 5-kilometer radius of where you happen to have your house, when in fact you may share interests and passions and, views on the world with people sort of wherever they are. And so they're trying to create groups of people who are just interested in the same things, which is a story as old as the internet, around tokenization. And that's a wonderful community. But again, like, I bought 75 FWB tokens 2 years ago to join that community. I don't really see that as an investment. I just see that as a ticket to enter a group of people that I want to chat to.
What does your wife or partner say about your pieces of art that you buy? Does she say, can we put them on the wall?
Some of them. She thought I was absolutely mad when I bought a CryptoPunk in January. She thinks I'm more sensible now, but
does she say sell it?
Yeah.
And what do you say?
No. Because I don't really see it as an investment. Like, I bought it because to me it's it's not really art, it's a piece of technology history. It was the first, it was a precursor to an ERC 7721. It was, I think one of the first and most important on-chain projects. And and maybe this is an arrogance, I just like owning a piece of that part of the internet's history. Like, I just think it's important. So no, don't plan to sell it, and I think I probably share that view with a whole bunch of punk owners, which is why the price is stupid.
Who are the sleeping giants in this space? Is there an easy, because there's a whole lot of trading going on, with what is Unity buying Weta, there's stuff moving, Meta, Facebook, but who are the people that you see are making moves that others might not see?
I'm most interested at the moment. This is probably going to bore your socks off, Andy. I'm most interested in this movement that people are labeling DeFi 2.0. So the most interesting things I'm seeing are happening sort of deep in the dark corners of the DeFi world. And Klima, the one that I mentioned earlier, that is, materially impacting like carbon pricing, I think it's fascinating. So they've taken an incentive mechanism pioneered by a protocol called Olympus DAO. Olympus DAO is trying to create a backed reserve currency for DeFi. And there's a bunch of complicated stuff that we probably don't need to go into around bonding mechanisms that they use to do that. But what they achieved was essentially to become a black hole for liquidity in DeFi. Like, they just become this vortex that they can attract a whole bunch of assets into their treasury. And so Klima looked at that mechanism and thought, oh, wow, like, what if we could bring something like carbon credits on chain, and carbon credits are kind of a naturally inflationary asset, and use them as a backing for a reserve currency. And people like me thought that was a cracking idea. And it's pretty sort of, you have to be, I guess, into the esoterics of economics to get excited by this. But the result of this is I think it's 5 weeks old now. Klima has bought 12 million carbon tons on chain, which is like a non-trivial portion of New Zealand's annual output. And if they continue to be successful, they'll drive up the carbon price, and this will hopefully, contribute to our fight against global warming. And so I think stuff like that, I think is a sleeping giant, and I think is world changing if it works.
Are you on a bunch of Discord servers?
Yeah, I've got way too many Discords. Like that.
Oh my god,
that to me is
crazy.
That to me is the biggest problem in Web3. I can't keep up with all of the things I'm interested in, and there's no way.
Like you have to have a full-time job.
It.
It's almost like you've got to have a full-time job to keep up, right?
So I think you need a feed. You kind of need like what Facebook did, which is taking all the crap and bringing it into the stuff that's relevant to you and you care about. I just have no idea how you do that in a decentralized way.
Regulation risk,
huge
macro perspective.
Yeah, it's the number one risk we write on all of our investment papers at Etri.
Is there an answer to that?
I don't know, to be honest, Andy. I think
that's a good answer.
I think were I in the kind of halls of power, and occasionally I get to talk to people who are, the point I make to them is, yes, there has been bad behavior in this sector in the past, and yes, you can use crypto for things that we don't want people using it for. But if you look at the sort of fundamental innovation and benefits that this sector can produce, I think as a regulator, if you want to be on the right side of history, then you want to be encouraging innovation in a safe way. So what China has done and what India seems to be proposing to do, of a flat out ban, I think they're trying to either bolster their own CBDCs or they're just worried about the implications for the state. I hope that regulators in other parts of the world don't follow that path. And I think my pitch to them is, this is where the smartest people in software are going. And this is the wave of innovation that I see coming. And if you want those people onshore, then, a friendly regulatory environment is the way to do that. But I don't know what's going to happen. It's a big risk.
Beyond that macro risk, is there anything else that worries you about the space?
I mean, there's scams. You're in a bunch of Discords. It sounds like I would get 10 phishing messages on Discord a day. I've seen, coming back to Olympus protocol, I think I've seen 30 or 40 forks of that protocol, of which at least 5 have just straight out rugged the people who've bought into them. So people have bought into these projects, and then the developers or whoever made the project have taken the money in the next day. So there's theft, there's scamming, there's phishing, there's all kinds of bad behavior.
I'm not quite up with it. Is it the little apes that was a scam that's happened in the last few days? Was it the little apes or little?
Possibly, don't
know. When you think about Australia and New Zealand, and you think about the opportunity that exists for this world, or for them in this world, are there some things that we need to get right around that? Because at times it feels like it's a little conversation happening on the edge with certain people. It's not mainstream. Although if you follow on TikTok, and then if you look at what kids are doing, you start to go, oh, maybe it's more than. So like, are there things that we need to be doing to create the opportunities for our people in the future?
I think regulation is the number one answer to that, to be honest. Like a friendly regulatory environment, or at least a sandbox in which people can experiment, is the number one thing. So we've invested, I probably won't name them given what I'm about to say, but we've invested in a decentralized options protocol, and the founders have moved to Singapore almost immediately because it's a more friendly regulatory environment, and it's just clearer that they can do what they're doing. That's a colossal shame, right? Like, it was a team of 6 of our brightest minds who would love to be in this country, but they're just not sure that it makes sense for them right now. So I think that's the number one thing. I don't think we need to encourage smart people to get into this sector. I think this is obvious to a bunch of smart people, and I think more people are building than you know. But the problem is that they're not comfortable talking about it because they're not sure exactly kind of the regulations around what they're doing. And I don't think anyone that I've met, or certainly anyone that I'm excited about investing in, is doing anything dodgy whatsoever. They're just pushing the frontiers of innovation such that they're just not sure how the rules apply to them.
A couple of people asked questions. One of them was, what regulatory changes need to happen for VCs to be able to participate more fully? Are there? Because I know, the SEC has a whole lot of rules in the US that saw Andreas and Horowitz kind of moved a little bit. But is there any limit on New Zealand or Australian VCs operating? I don't think there is there?
Fine. The only limits in place are to the extent that you're operating under a framework that has tax benefits. So in Australia, there's one called the ESVCLP regime, and I can't remember what its equivalent in New Zealand is called. Sometimes those regimes specify the types of things you can invest in. And so in the Australian one, for example, you can't invest in fintech. But there's nothing to stop you investing in Web3. It just means you need a different fund structure.
Yeah, okay. Now, another question was this, I don't know whether it's an emerging best practice, but as entities are being created in this Web3 world, the balance of returns for the projects versus this decentralization sharing thing going on, because you get a lot of people in Web3 who think it's a way to get away from the control thesis world. And I'm not going to say who want free love, but they want freer distribution of the benefits that come from that community development.
Yeah.
So how does VC go? Does that mean that you choose places to get involved and not into other places, obviously?
Yeah, or the founders choose. It's not necessarily
which is even better. Right? Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of projects and protocols doing things that aren't VC fundable. A bunch of the NFT drops that you've just described are perfect examples of that. Something like Loot, I would have loved to invest in as a VC, but when it's a completely free drop and it's only gas, really, really hard for us to do. Similarly, there's a bunch of DeFi projects that are doing various versions of fair launches, things like initial Discord offerings or LBPs or IDOs. They're all kind of hard for us. And there's good reasons that those projects choose them. And typically it's because they have an active enough user base already or, community already that they don't need to go to anyone external. They can just go to their community. I think that's great. Like, I think that's healthy competition.
What, do you know Paradigm?
Yeah.
Do you think you could see people like Airtree taking teams in-house, like venture studio style in this world?
Yeah.
Or you're smiling?
Well, I don't
already doing it.
I don't want to tell you all our plans, Andy, but yes, it would seem like a good idea to surround yourself with entrepreneurs, hypothetically.
It's a tradition on my Real Talks that everyone has to tell a secret or sing a song. Have you got a secret you can share?
Well, I mean, there's a DeFi team sitting downstairs at our office right now.
Woo! That's pretty cool. Do you think traditional finance might look at index style funds around the sector?
What do you mean by index style?
Spread, cover. Don't be a domain expert. Just go, let's just put a little bit into everything.
You mean VC?
What I'm saying is, like, make an investment fund making a play on the sector, by spreading risk, not making a small number of VC investments early and going deep with them, just going really wide.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's hard right now. Just again, from a regulation perspective, you can only really get access to Bitcoin through things like Grayscale and the ETFs. So I think if you were taking a sector-wide approach, you would kind of take a market cap weighted bet on the top 10 or 20 tokens or something like that. That would be the way to do it. I think a lot of people are doing that already. So I think the regulation is what's stopping real institutional capital flows into that. But I expect a lot of people will want just a broad access to crypto without a view on any specific project.
Do you think we have too many lawyers in this world?
Yes, but that's not a Web3. That's not a Web3.
No, but it's. I mean, all these talks I do is, I always try to get into the human side of people, and you did a law degree and a science degree, right?
Yeah.
Way back when, right?
Yeah.
And I'm that's a super interesting combo, law and science, right? I did a law degree and business degree, didn't do science. And now you've ended up in VC.
Mm-hmm.
Like, did you know you wanted to be a VC when you were like an 18-year-old heading to uni in Australia or in New South Wales?
No, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And then when I was an entrepreneur, I realized how hard it was, and what the VCs were doing seemed to be way more fun. So I didn't know I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I did law because, to be honest with you, Andy, just because it was hard to get into, which is a terrible reason to do law. I didn't at 18. I had no idea really what I wanted to do. Like I loosely liked the idea of entrepreneurship, but like I couldn't have told you what type of company I wanted to build. And then I looked at the marks required to get into different courses, and law was up the top. And so I thought, oh, well, I better do that, which is a ridiculous reason. Like, I think I admire the American university system much more, where they do a generalized first year and then figure out what they want to do, because I certainly had no idea at the age at which I was choosing.
It's super hard, right, to know, and Melbourne Uni does that now, same American system. But
yeah.
You just said, you always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Where did that come from? Was that part of your makeup, or was it the patterns when you were a kid? Was it your parents?
I actually don't know, to be honest. I think I always liked the idea of having a team. And I like the idea of sort of creating something, but I don't know where that came from. Mum was a librarian and dad worked in an insurance company, so it definitely wasn't in the genes.
Interesting. Shifting a bit, thinking about creatives, artists, I've certainly got a hypothesis that I'm pretty optimistic for people who create and make things, right, in this world. And, in New Zealand, our Māori and Pacifica are unbelievably creative. But they're also, for one reason or another, shut out of many worlds. And so I spend quite a lot of time thinking about, what those opportunities are for it's not just Indigenous people, it's for our diverse communities. And the web world gets me super excited because the scale of community does not have to be 1 million users to monetize. Like, what do you think about that world of, and it's, by the way, it's what's super interesting is a creative in a physical world may also be very different to the creatives in the digital world.
Yeah. I think it's a really good point. I'm sort of both optimistic and pessimistic, to be honest. I'm optimistic in the sense that I'm a huge believer in Kevin Kelly's Thousand True Fans thesis, which basically says that so long as you can find somewhere in the world 1,000 people that are interested in what you're doing, you can make a living from accessing those people. And I think the web, and then Web3 specifically, uniquely enable that to happen. And so to the extent that I think creators have a better shot at doing what they love and finding their communities now than they ever have in history. So that's kind of like the optimistic part. I think the pessimistic part, and it goes to what you're saying, I think, about being shut out from certain areas. I'm leading a seed round in a crypto deal right now. One of the pledges we make at Airtree is that we'll bring a diverse angel investor onto the cap table with every investment we do. I am having an incredibly hard time finding someone to fill the slot in that company right now, which I think speaks to a broader issue, which makes me pessimistic, which is that software development skews massively young, white or Asian male. And I think Web3, like, it's hard to know because a lot of people are anonymous, but every interaction I've had would suggest Web3 is going the same way.
Why? What sort of check size
But
do you need?
25K, 10K.
Why are there so few females in the NFT world?
I wish I had a better answer for you. I mean, partly we don't know. Like most of the NFT creators are anonymous, but when you get onto Discord and you get onto voice chats, it's pretty clear that they're not, women-led communities. So I don't know.
It's a really interesting challenge around how to be a part of the change in that. How does Airtree think about and focus on diversity? Like, how do you emanate the diversity into your own organization?
Yeah, well, a few things. So I think it starts with our team, right? So half our team is women, and then within that, the ethnic spread is actually pretty good. 2 of our 5 investing partners are women, although they're both white Anglo-Saxon women, so not such a good ethnic spread. But I think we're trying to make a big effort to not just hire people that look like me. That takes time, but I think we've made good steps. The second thing is the one that I just described. So we make sure that cap tables don't just get filled with people that look like me, and we try and make an effort every time we lead a deal to ensure that that's not the case. The third thing we do is we try and instill these values to the extent we have influence in our portfolio companies. So one of the standard clauses in our term sheets is that every time a company that we're invested in is looking to hire an executive role, they need to have a diverse candidate in the final interview stage, which is they don't have to hire them, but they have to at least optimize their funnels such that they're not just looking at people that look the same.
Yeah.
So there's a few examples of things we do, but I'll be honest with you, Andy, it's an uphill battle. Like we just posted for an associate role to join our firm, and I think the numbers were something like 81% of the applications were male. Like it's horrific.
Yeah. Okay. It's disappointing and it's heavy, but actually with those things, the only thing we can do is focus on it and be a part of the change, right?
Yeah, and we're spending a lot more time measuring it. So we now measure every stage of our funnel. In our CRM, we have a whole bunch of diversity tags so that we're tracking it. But because you can't change what you don't measure. But I don't have a silver bullet. Like it's a really hard problem.
This is a strange question. Has everything you've been involved in been successful?
No.
No. Do you learn more from your success or your failures?
I don't know, actually. I think you learn from both. Like I think the cliched answer is that you learn from your failures and you should lean into them and all those kind of things. But I've been privileged, at least in a work context, to be involved in a handful of very, very successful companies. And I think when you're advising founders on sort of challenges, I think pointing to what successful people have done is as valuable as failures a lot of the time. So I think both.
Strategy on the fly for Monarchy itself, right? So, we're a community that, and I beat myself up. I've had a pretty tough last couple of weeks as I continue to get no's from people. And it's super interesting as a founder yourself, when you've been a investor, right, and you get all these people pitching to you, and then you've got your own project and you're like, this is quite hard. And, I've got a lot of no's. And so the question, and by the way, I don't blame people for saying no to us, right? We take on responsibility for the way we pitch it. But when you think about communities, tech communities, groups, is there a way and a path for them into this Web3 world around like building DAOs themselves? I've been thinking about Monarchy as a social platform and community for Indigenous small business.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty excited about what is happening here in New Zealand around that. And so I start to go, wow, wouldn't it be incredible if we could leverage that into other Indigenous communities and other places around the world? Do we just do a token?
I don't think a token is a solve for the rest of community building. Like I think tokens work to provide an economic incentive people around behaviors that you design. But I think you need to figure out like who is the target community, like who are we trying to attract into this, and then what do we want them to do? Like what sort of actions do we want them to take? How do we want them to help each other? And then
I think it's the same.
Of that.
So interesting, like I know I've talked to you separately about my friend who's got an ambition around helping young females grow into their life of dealing with their hormones and being more body confident, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's an extraordinary mission that she has that's much bigger than her, let's get this app into the community to help runners. And so it's interesting, often the people who might benefit from engaging in the community are not necessarily the ones that will pay to enable the resourcing and monetization. And so because I get communities with users, if they're the same thing and they get utility from it, they'll buy and pay.
So is your challenge there that the people that you want aren't the ones that would pay for a token?
No, it's kind of going, I think that the people who may believe in the vision themselves may go, this is freaking cool. I'd love to see this happen so that, for example, more Indigenous businesses can be supported and enabled and reach their success. And I'm prepared to buy or lend or invest in the token release or something in that mahi, in that objective, because I believe in it. It's like old world charity endowment funding.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Sort of playing around with it. I'm trying to, because here's the interesting thing, right? And look, I'm a male, but if you're I don't know how many 40-year-old women I talk to who will share their experience of being a young female and the freakiness that goes on with their bodies, and then how society shames them and how they feel about it. Those people who have been through the journey are way more like, I get this. I want to back that so I don't have to go through that shit again. I just, I think it's a really interesting emerging area.
Yeah.
And I don't have an answer.
I don't have an answer, but yes, I it's not obvious to me that tokens are necessarily a solution there, but I think the problem that you're describing is real, like for sure.
Take yourself to the 15-year-old student version of you. You're at school today, year 11, year 10 at high school. What would be your advice to that 15-year-old around where to go and what to do?
Well, firstly, I'd tell him to stop stressing about his pimples. That consumed way too much of my teenage years. I don't know if I would give, maybe I'm too divorced from this world, Andy. I don't know if I would give a 15-year-old that much advice. Like, I think I would just tell him to have fun at that age. I think we're sort of, as a society, we're sort of becoming too goal focused, and you're too much on the train tracks, and you need to do this and achieve that by this age. And like, to me, 15 is still a bit young. I think I'd probably have a different conversation with an 18 or 19-year-old who need to start figuring out like what they're going to do with themselves. But I think the conversation I'd have with myself at 15 is just go and spend all your time with your friends. Because like, if you're a good person and you're a good friend, then that'll set you up for life.
How old are your kids?
3 and 1.
Okay, good. My it's highly likely my daughter will end up living in Sydney, so she's an amazing babysitter, mate. She'll be there in 18 months, studying hopefully in Sydney.
Wonderful.
So, yeah, she's getting lots of practice with all the babies in the street, so she'll be well tuned by then. What's next for you, John? Just continue to build Airtree, continue to build your practice.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'm spending 80% plus of my time on Web3 these days. And I think
That's cool.
I think that's a step change, to be honest. Like I genuinely feel like this is the next evolution of the internet. And so I'm trying to be as deep as possible in a whole bunch of, weird and wacky communities and Discord groups and Telegram groups. And I see that as my next couple of years and figuring out just how to work and contribute in that world. But otherwise, the fund strategy is largely the same. We'll probably raise a new fund at some point, and we may have some things to say about this part of the world as part of that fund. But we just want to keep backing the next generation of Aussie and Kiwi entrepreneurs. And the reason for that is we kind of have this passionate belief that innovation and technology are our future, and that we have to stop, digging rocks out of the ground or whatever we've done in the past. And, we're still a small fund, but we've created, we in our portfolio have created 7,000 jobs in the last 5 years, which is, more than a few coal mines. So I think we can actually make a positive difference to the economies of this part of the world. And if we don't do that, then I think Australia and New Zealand get left behind.
Is a New Zealand office in your future?
Yeah, so if you'd asked me 2 years ago, I would have said definitely not, because I was on the ground at least monthly.
Yeah, you were.
Lockdown has really made me feel disconnected from New Zealand in a way that makes me sad. I'm still
paranoid that you're missing out on deals.
Yeah, and a big dose of FOMO. I'm still sort of seeing like what the new normal is and how the world opens up.
Yeah.
But if we're in a world of infrequent travel for much longer, then maybe I'll change my mind.
Yeah. Hey, can I say thank you very much? You're a very thoughtful person, very open. People, if you want to learn, I've learned a lot about DeFi from following John on Twitter. And that's one of the things I love about Twitter is that you choose people to follow, and then you just get amazing content, and also the opportunity to then go and do your own research. So I really appreciate you taking the time, because there's actually not that many VCs who are in both worlds, in Australia and New Zealand. And so I just appreciate you taking the time to do that and to share. And we call you an honorary Kiwi, just because you've got so much money and we have to be nice to you. But and I am coming to play golf with you in Sydney in January, which is going to be great. And yeah, I just wanted to say thank you very much, Mr. Henderson. Greatly appreciate it.
Hey, Andy, thanks for having me. And thanks maybe on behalf of the rest of the community for pulling Monarchy together. I think what you are doing with this group and the sort of movement that you're creating is hugely impactful for communities in New Zealand and small businesses in New Zealand. So it's a pleasure, and I'm happy to help out in any way I can.
You're amazing. And so to everyone else, hey, thank you very much. Now, next week, actually, we've got Sam from Method Studios and Jess from Beyond Games Studio I'll be interviewing. And then we've got 2 or 3 more international people coming along before Christmas. So tune in, subscribe to our YouTube channel, come to see us at monarchy.io. And everyone have a great rest of the day. Happy weekend. See you, mate. Have a good Friday over in Aussie. Enjoy your day. Thank you very much, Johnny, for coming. See ya. See you, everyone.